really, really glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I know this is kind of the graveyard slot, and people have just eaten, and it's a bit difficult. But I actually want to start by kind of reprising some of the discussions that were had this morning about design that I thought were really interesting. I mean, I'm an artist, but I'm also a designer, and some of the discussions about the value of design I thought were really interesting. I think there seems to be a need, or a certain perceived need, that design should be adding something new. And I think, we had a discussion about design as added value in terms of branding, in terms of designer's desire, designer's quality, which I thought was an interesting one, designer's problem solving, which I think is the most archetypal, classic idea of design. But what I'd like to talk about is kind of design which is about designing systems, and systems about trust, particularly in terms of politics, where we don't really think about these things being designed. Well, they're made by people, right? And trust is very, very important in those kind of systems. And I think we certainly don't think about desire within those kind of systems. We don't think about added value. We don't really think about quality. We don't really think about problem solving. So I'd like to bring all those kind of ideas into that kind of into that realm of designing kind of political systems, specifically in a kind of local context. And I just want to start off with this image that I actually really love from Woolworths, as you can see here. This is their way of, used to be their way of relating to their kind of audience. Did you enjoy shopping with us today? Yes, no. Smiley face, a kind of unhappy face. And I think it's kind of depressing, and I think it's really the way that so much of our society kind of engages with the people out there. It's all about yes-no relationships. We happen to get lucky with this particular one, but yet it's still a binary yes-no choice. And I think the kind of presentation of trust that these kind of things evoke, I think it's very interesting the way that whole layout of this kind of strange digital studio is designed to kind of evoke trust by kind of these kind of old-fashioned classic-y looking, but actually looking like Second Life kind of scenarios. And this is kind of, for me, maybe the archetypal example of where trust really doesn't work, and design as actually breaking down trust. The mosquito device that I'm sure you've heard about, kind of sending out ultrasonic sounds to kind of deter young people from hanging around, okay? It's a way of actually alleviating a conversation. And I think it's very, very depressing. And I think so many of these kind of devices that we're talking about are actually using technology to mediate social relationships in a way that really doesn't benefit anybody. So I guess what I'd like to talk to you about is a very concrete example here. Here you can see the kind of sprawl of London with the O2 Arena in the middle there. But what's really interesting is I worked in this area called, well, the Peninsula, as the developers started identifying it. So you can see the O2 Arena over here. But you can see how in that photograph on their website, they basically chop off this kind of sprawl of London, like this, into this kind of manageable area. And I think that's one of the classic things that actually happens. When an area is going to be redeveloped, the first thing is to kind of create a sense of this place as being a place. The people who live there don't think of this as being the Greenwich Peninsula at all. And if you look further on the website, this is, for example, the proposal for the Greenwich Peninsula, all these kind of large high-rise buildings with a 43-story hotel at the front there. And further forward, world-class entertainment on your doorstep. Now, what I do is I work with local communities, and I really work with the people who live there and who've been living there for a long time before this became about world-class entertainment. And I guess there's a feeling that they are not really included in the kind of the goodies that are coming to this area. Like the supermarket's the other side of the big motorway, for example. And they're not feeling that they're really being consulted. So what I kind of do is I try and work with these kind of targeted communities and try and think about what really went wrong here with the democratic process of this places. One of the things that you mentioned, actually, this is the biomapping device that I invented. It measures your galvanic skin response, i.e. the sweat level in your skin, in conjunction with your location. What happens is basically I wire people up like this and I send them out for a walk in the local area. We come back and we talk about this stuff, and what you see is these kind of things. you see where somebody is going for a walk, and you see that this kind of the spike, i.e. the height of the graph, is their physiological arousal, okay? So this is kind of interesting, here it's about the busy traffic crossing, or, it's about social interaction near the supermarket that I was talking about, a woman going for a walk with her daughter, having an argument there. But it's also about memory, having driving lessons there, or actually that's where they lived, those kind of spikes over here. So what the device records is a really basic measure of your body. But what's really interesting is how people start interpreting this stuff and making sense of it for their lives. So I think in a way that's quite similar to the kind of the kind of life logging that was kind of mentioned earlier on. This is, if you like, a social idea of this. Because what I do is I really take these individual stories and I work with large numbers of people in an area. This was about 100 people over a period of months. And we start aggregating the data and we start producing these kind of communal maps. So there's the Greenwich emotion map. And what you see here is you have a surface of communal arousal. For example, the bright red areas are high arousal. So this could be positive or negative, but it's the way to think about it is actually in terms of attention. This is an area where there's something really happening, whereas kind of the blue areas are kind of calm areas. There's nothing really happening. So it's really about measuring our involvement with our area. And you start seeing some of the stories that are starting to emerge about the place. Sainsbury's that are apparently kind of green, but actually, the wind turbines are never working, and some of the kind of issues about the regeneration that's happening there. They want to demolish the Millennium Cafe, which is one of the few social spaces in that place. And people care about it, people are taking photographs about it, it's a high arousal area. So what I really try and do is I try and see how this device, which is fantastic about thinking about your own body, how am I reacting to this stuff? But actually talking about it within a group, in a workshop, so people can really look inside each other's bodies and actually talk about it. It's a sharing stuff that's about the local area and about yourself. And that becomes really powerful once you start aggregating it. So I've been doing these projects in lots of places. This is San Francisco, for example, or Paris, Stockport. I think the process for me has been, I come from a fine art background. I started doing design stuff, but I started realizing that these things were important enough to really get involved in the political processes. So, for example, this one in Stockport was actually a consultation exercise for the local government. And I'll give you a little, so the kind of the biomapping in this case is this kind of bar up here, but we also got people to do drawings. So you see, for example, the old market. It's a high arousal area. It's really where all the social interactions are happening. And you also have people's drawings of these places, versus, for example, the shopping center, which is actually covering the main river in Stockport, which is kind of fairly low arousal. It's full of CCTV cameras and people pushing their prams around. Not very exciting. And actually, you start seeing from the drawings, you also see the real social stuff of Stockport, right? There's a Stockport Scally, for example. The real issue in Stockport is that a lot of the young people from about 20 to 30 are leaving the town to go to Manchester. So you actually have lots of young people and lots of old people. And there's a big tension between them. So a lot of the older people are really drawing the young people in this very, very particular way. So the kind of projects that I do these days are really about trying to get a sense of what are the real issues in a place. And I use various kind of ethnographic techniques to do this. But the key point of them is that they're actually working with people. And they actually get a quality experience from this. That's actually building a trust relationship. And it's actually involving them in what are the real issues of concern. Let me give you a very detailed example. City Airport. They want to increase the number of flights at the weekend. And I've been working with a group of people who've been kind of doing measurements for a long time, but very much on an individual basis. And we were working to actually find a way of aggregating this stuff. So we were actually giving new decibel meters out. This is a research project with the university. And actually finding a methodology that included these readings of flights at different times, but also personal perceptions. How does this noise really affect you? When does it affect you the most? And those kind of things are never taken account of by the government when you look at these things. It's all about decibel levels. Or working with young people on kind of their sensory experiences, And what we what we do is I kind of produce these kind of different maps like this, and you see the kind of stories, the same plane taking off again, Swiss Air. Thought to myself, why do they lie about the noise of the aircraft? Aircraft movements blending into road traffic hum, louder during the day, fairly annoying. What was really interesting, we could start seeing which kind of noises were really annoying. For example, the people there didn't perceive the river traffic to be annoying at all. It's really the planes. And by actually having this visualized in this kind of communal way, they could really see amongst themselves that they were all really strongly annoyed by particular types of flights. And that really allowed them to kind of focus their action in a really different way. And in a way, some of these people have been collecting noise readings for the last 10 years, and they haven't been able to kind of take that step back to reflect on their own kind of processes. And I think, for example, in that example, the most powerful thing was actually looking at the way that people categorized their experiences. So if you look at noise that they categorized as being acceptable, it was between kind of 40 to, I would say, 60 decibels here, whereas noise that was annoying was around 60 to 80 decibels. And you can see by the kind of clustering of this how accurate people were. Well, accurate, how clearly defined these things are in terms of decibel readings matching to people's verbal descriptions of a particular noise. And actually, when we showed this to the environmental health officer, they realized, wow, this means we can actually scale this stuff up. Rather than having a small group of maybe 20 people doing these kind of readings, why don't we have 1,000 people doing this? We don't need all the gizmos. We can really we can use people's experience in a very different way. And I think that's a really powerful step that's changing, right? People are starting to value the kind of experiential world much more, and starting to take this into account when we think about redesigning our places. So when we think about trust relationships, it's all about thinking about the perceptual level, thinking about us as embodied human beings. And if you want to build up a relationship with people, you really need to work with people. And it's not about branding to people, in my opinion. It's about actually finding a way of really working with people. So we're trying to get the airport on board with this as well, because they are stakeholders in this area. And these projects become kind of large public displays. This is a project in Brentford. This is a 10-meter long wall, for example, where we made a map that really was looking at the whole context of this place. And the particular issue in Brentford is actually about the new and the old buildings just not really working together. What's happening is that the developers are building new small flats, which are basically for childless couples to move into, or actually single people. So there's the amount of children in the local school are going down, which is having a huge effect on the community, because the community was actually being built by people meeting through their children in a strange kind of way. So actually the whole area is changing through something as simple as the type of flats that are being built. And those kind of things are really powerful once you actually start people doing drawings and really expressing these kind of issues for themselves. And what happened is we actually got the local mayor involved in this process. So what I do is I actually get all the developers and the stakeholders really involved in this stuff. So I really would encourage you to actually, don't farm out the kind of consultation aspects of what you do to other people, but really get involved with working with the kind of people that you're actually talking to. And actually do some future visioning with them. Right? I mean, getting the mayor to do little pencil sketches is really powerful, as well as getting little kids to do it. And being able to see the two next to each other, you can actually see lots of patterns in it. And yeah, I think it's a very powerful technique for changing the way we think about our audience.